today. Dog's having fun today. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming out this morning as we launch on what I think will be a historic campaign here in British Columbia. A campaign, quite frankly, that will give a very clear distinction about where this province will go and where this province needs to go. BC is at a crossroads. It's at a crossroads on many stages across British Columbia. The question is, are we going to fight for a future, or are we going to continue to manage decline? When you look out behind me at the beautiful scenery, at the industrial activity that's happening, or at the tents and the drugs and the addictions that are going on, it is a stark contrast between what we're trying to do for the people in British Columbia and where we hope to see hope for our future, and to the David Eby and Justin Trudeau approach, which has led to so many challenges and issues across this province. Whether it is affordability, people in this province can't afford to live here. Last year, 72,500 people left British Columbia, a record in British Columbia's history. The only time we even came close to that was during the NDP in the 1990s, in 1998, where it was over 60,000 people that left this province. 1 in 3 people in British Columbia are thinking about leaving. 1 in 2 youth are thinking about leaving because they cannot think about how they can build a future here in British Columbia. Our healthcare system is broken. It is in a crisis. Hard-working people across this province are just struggling to make ends meet. Close to half the people in this province are struggling to put food on the table and pay their rent. It's no wonder why people want to leave. Hope seems to be gone from this province. We need to put people first. We need to put common sense first ahead of politics and political rhetoric. We need to be able to present this province with a vision for how people can build their future, how people can live a solid life, and to be able to raise their children and their grandchildren with an expectation that they can stay here and have the same hopes and dreams that everybody else has had in the past. It is a clear choice, a choice between the chaos of what has happened over the last 7 years or a common sense vision for people in this province to be able to build a future. Over the next 29 days of this election, the Conservative Party of British Columbia will be laying out a clear vision in terms of hope and prosperity, in terms of ending the politics and the politicized rhetoric that we're seeing, making sure that people have an honest and straight up opportunity to be able to see a province where they can build their future in. What we have seen from David Eby, quite frankly, is weak leadership. He has not been able to fix many of the problems that we have in this province, whether it is the addictions and not being able to tackle the addictions crisis, whether it is healthcare and doing more of the same and expecting a different result, or whether, quite frankly, it is the issue of housing, where he seems to think that it's government's job and not unleashing the potential that we need in this province for housing. So many things that are wrong in this province, but there is hope. There is hope that we can bring change. Whether it is getting rid of the carbon tax, whether it's the investments that we're going to make in healthcare, whether it is the changes that we need to do to get treatment and recovery in place for people with addictions, or whether it is making sure that we get our economy going. British Columbia currently has a $9 billion deficit. I expect that to grow to being well over $10 billion by the time we get to March. People are struggling. We need to make these shifts. We need to be able to make sure that British Columbia can be a place that people can be proud to call home again. 72,500 people in this province felt they could not have a future here and have left last year. Who knows what that record will be this year, but I suspect it'll be high, especially when we're at a stage where 1 in 3 people want to leave this province and 1 or 2 youth. So for my wife and I, and I'm really pleased that Kim is here with me today on the beginning of this campaign, we stand united. We stand united in looking forward to an optimistic future in British Columbia. We stand with our candidates across this province to fight for that common sense change And we stand, quite frankly, to say that we are proud to be British Columbians. Unlike a government that tells the public service that they're not allowed to call people British Columbians because they're worried they might offend somebody. I'm sorry, I'm a proud Canadian. I'm a proud British Columbian. We have everything we could ever want in this province. We have all the resources we want. We've got a well-trained, well-educated population. We have all the potential, but it is hopelessly managed. And over the next 29 days, we'll be laying out our plan to show how this can be managed much better, how we can make sure people can have that future, that we have the supports in place for people, but most importantly, I should say, those 1 and 2 youth will hopefully change their minds and say, yes, British Columbia is a place that I want to stay in. British Columbia can be a safe place. British Columbia is a place where we get the services, but most importantly, British Columbia is a place where I can stay here and build a future. That's the vision we have for British Columbia. That's the way this campaign, I think, needs to go, is people need to make that clear decision about whether it is tent cities and the crime and the addictions and a collapsing healthcare system and unaffordability, or whether it is hope for prosperity for a better future. The decision is clear, and I very much look forward to the campaign ahead. With that, I'll take any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. For people who want to ask questions here, please line up with the mic. And for people calling in, I want to remind you guys to press *1 if you want to queue into the questions. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Rustad. Paul Johnson from Global News. I want to follow up on a story that we reported on earlier this week. This was about a document from the government that outlined their proposed changes to the Land Act to incorporate Indigenous governing bodies into decisions made about Crown land. We asked the Premier about that earlier this week, and he said you and your party on this are pushing conspiracy theories. Want to get your reaction to the allegation of conspiracy theories that he said are not helpful. And then I have a follow-up after that.
Sure. So what has been very clear is David Eby's government came out and announced that they were going to make changes to the Lands Act to include First Nations in decision-making on the land. I used to be the minister responsible for Aboriginal Relations Reconciliation. I signed over 435 agreements with First Nations. We have always done what's called shared decision-making, where we sit down, we work with First Nations, we work through the issues, we do adjustments, we provide accommodation, but the province retains being the final decision-maker on Crown land. It's different from title land, but on Crown land. And what David Eby is proposing to do is to go a step further, which is to fully implement these measures to have joint decision-making with First Nations. And in joint decision-making, that means that every decision-maker has to agree or nothing moves forward. So if you are on a First Nation in a government, you work through the issues, if you come to agreement, it moves forward. If you are, say, part of 12 First Nations and they don't agree with each other, they don't even agree that the other person should be at the table, what'll end up happening is without agreement, no decision can go forward. And that means that nothing can happen on the landscape. And so, for example, if there is a dispute as to who should be able to access Crown land, ultimately, unless there's agreement, nobody would be able to access Crown land, whether that's for industrial, recreational, or other purposes. And to my opinion, the government of British Columbia needs to retain being the final decision maker on behalf of all British Columbians. We need to work with First Nations to address title, to move forward with their concerns of Section 35. And this obviously gets quite technical with that. But at the end of the day, the decisions by government have to be made by the elected government on behalf of all British Columbians. Those decisions cannot be put in the hand of 204 First Nations for the entire province. When it comes to their title land, when it comes to those decisions, obviously, the Supreme Court has been very clear. Those decisions are the First Nations decisions as to what needs to happen within those territories, with provisions for Canada and British Columbia to be able to do things that are in the interest of all British Columbians.
Thanks, and no follow-up. You pretty much covered it there in your response.
Thank you.
Yield the mic.
Good afternoon. Joe Sadowski, City News. I just want your reaction to David Eby's announcement about involuntary care. Do you agree with it? And how would you handle that in terms of if you were elected?
Well, first of all, what David Eby talked about is more long-term care in terms of involuntary care. I agree that we need to have compassionate care. I don't agree that he is going to be taking away hospital beds from within our system to be able to do this, because we actually need to build out new facilities and additional facilities, not utilize the hospital beds that are already in high demand. And with the wait times and the collapse we have in the healthcare system, we need to be able to build out a new model. But the second piece of this that I think is most important is if you are a parent and you have an 11-year-old daughter who's addicted, you want to be able to do everything you can to help that daughter go into treatment and recovery and to be able to live a full life. And if the daughter does not want to go into treatment, as a parent, there's nothing you can do in British Columbia. We want to change that so that as a parent, you can do everything you can to be able to make sure that a child who is suffering from an addiction can get the treatment they need and to be able to make sure that they can live a full and productive life in British Columbia. And I think any parent in this province would want to do that, which is why we're going to be looking at involuntary compassionate care for cases like that in British Columbia, which is something David Eby has not committed to doing.
And when it comes down to the drug and opioid crisis here in downtown, how are you going to tackle safety in the downtown sector and just overall in the province?
So there's a number of things in there because you have crime, you have addictions, you have mental health. The three don't necessarily go together, but sometimes they do. So when it comes to dealing with the mental health and the mental health addictions that we have, the addiction problems we have, we need to build out a full regimen to recovery. Everything from doctor-prescribed treatment to short-term treatment and recovery to longer-term recovery for people that need to move beyond just the addictions, but also be able to help them with the life skills. As I mentioned, that compassionate and voluntary care and long-term care. And by doing this, our goal is to try to bring an end to this crisis of overdoses in British Columbia. There's a display up in Campbell River today with 12,000 flags, blue flags, one for each man and boy who has died from the opioid crisis. There's women who have died as well. But you go and you see that and you realize, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's father. This approach we've taken has been unsuccessful. We need to do everything we can to help people get into a path to recovery to be able to live full and productive lives. And that's a big piece of what you need to do around the downtown core. Now, there's lots of issues around crime as well. Particularly, police are telling me that 20% of the people are committing 80% of the crimes. These prolific criminals need to have consequences for their crimes. We're going to be pushing for guaranteed minimum sentencing on the federal side. We need to change the bail side, and there's much more that we're also going to be introducing associated with how we address crime in British Columbia in the days ahead.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next question, I just want to remind people in the call-in to press *1 if you wanted to be added to the queue.
Okay, perfect. Mira Baines with CBC. So, John, why start and kick off your campaign here in Crab Park? And what is your plan for dealing with homelessness?
So, as I mentioned, the reason for being here in Crab Park, other than it's a nice setting, it's beautiful to be able to see the industrial and the healthy and activity as a contrast to what David Eby with Justin Trudeau have delivered for people in British Columbia. So that's a stark contrast that obviously we want to be able to highlight. So dealing with homeless is obviously a huge issue, but it's not. It's once again divided into different categories. There are people who are homeless, who are down on their luck, that just need support. They need to be able to find a way to be able to get into house. We need to make sure that we have those options to be able to help those people get into housing. But we also need to be looking at how we address the mental health and particularly the addiction side. Unlike David Eby, I am not interested in building drug dens in neighborhoods where we continue to have just distribute this drug problem in communities. We do need to build out housing and support that's needed, but the key there is you need to be able to address the addictions. You need to be able to have that recovery in place for people before you move them into neighborhoods around this province. So that's a big piece of that we need to be able to build out in British Columbia.
There has been some criticism from the BC NDP table today, basically saying that you haven't done enough to quiet some of the conspiracy theorists, anti-vaccine, anti-abortion, homophobic candidates. What is your response when you see attacks like that coming from the NDP?
Well, I expect nothing less from the NDP. I expect nothing less from David Eby. What we have seen, quite frankly, from David Eby is nothing but lies. He's saying we're going to cut healthcare spending. That is a lie. He says we're going to bring out MSP. That is a lie. He says that we're going to put bridge tolls. That is a lie. He says we're going to be attacking reproductive rights. That is a lie. these are the things that David Eby is doing. He is so comfortable with lying that I do not expect anything less from David Eby and the NDP, but to come out with nothing but rhetoric, because they cannot defend the policies and approaches they have done to British Columbia.
Hi, Mr. Rustad. My name is Anaïs Elboujani. I'm from Radio-Canada. I was wondering if you could lay for us the path of your campaign, and also if you're going to partake in any debates whilst on the trail.
Thank you for that. Obviously, we're going to be campaigning in every corner of this province as we move around, and as we're reaching out and connecting with people right across this province. We'd actually look forward to what we're doing today. After this, we're heading to Vancouver Island, and we're going to be campaigning on Vancouver Island, and then we'll be back in the Lower Mainland on Sunday. So there's lots that's going to be done. With regards to debates, we've agreed to do the CKNW debate, which will be a radio debate that'll be coming up, I think, on the 2nd of October. We've agreed to working with the Vancouver Board of Trade. There's a discussion that's going on there. It's not really a debate. We're also doing the syndicate debate publicly with that. And then we're just right now working out the details with the Surrey Board of Trade in terms of the debate that they're planning to have, to make sure that we're able to attend that if we can.
All right, we're going to go into call-in, and we're going to pick on Andrew first.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Rustad. In your comments, you said healthcare is broken. You know, one of the NDP's talking points is that you would cut $4.1 billion out of the budget. I took from your earlier comments that that's incorrect. I just hoping maybe you can stress that a bit. And then also, what is your best idea to fix the healthcare system?
So one of the reasons why we were first introduced healthcare as the first major platform piece in this province is because it does need a major overhaul. We are the second most expensive healthcare system in the world, and according to the Organization of Cooperation and Economic Development, the OECD nations, we are the second worst healthcare outcomes in the world. And so when you look at that, you think, okay, if we're the second most expensive and we're not getting the results, clearly we need to be looking at different models. So we're looking at the European models of healthcare, which are universal healthcare, just like we have, but delivered by both government and non-government agencies. And by doing that, the funding follows the patient as opposed to the system, because at the end of the day, our healthcare system should be focused on patients, where a government that we currently have in place is arguing, quite frankly, that the system is more important than patient suffering, and we couldn't disagree more. So this is a big shift that we're going to do there. And with regards to funding, you'll see as we get further into the campaign how we price out healthcare. But I can tell you this, that our healthcare spending in this province will be going up at a scheduled rate, certainly over the next term. But as we improve our healthcare model, I'm expecting that we will find efficiencies, which helps us to expand healthcare even further, which is what our plan is as the Conservative Party of British Columbia.
That'll be all. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.